It is my pleasure to welcome our next speaker joining us today, Brittany Deal. She is the Manager of Strategic Analysis at Lafayette Economic Development Authority. Brittany understands how analyzing data can be overwhelming, especially for entrepreneurs and small business owners. But today, she will help us find a better way to utilize data for our businesses. Brittany, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Corey. And good afternoon to everyone. As Corey said, I'm Brittany Deal, the Manager of Strategic Analysis for the Lafayette Economic Development Authority, and I want to thank you guys for joining me today. So, are you drowning in data? Here we go. So, are you drowning in data? Well, if you are, we'll cover some tips today that'll help you swim rather than sink. So, fun fact, in 1880, it took the US Census 8 years to tabulate and create a final report. That means in only 2 years, they had to start the process all over again. To put that in a bit of more perspective, today, Google processes data from 40,000 search queries every second. Mind blown. That is probably why whenever someone asks me what I do, my forever response is that I am a professional Googler. And the fact of the matter is that data is all around us. We must learn to decipher what the data is telling us, how our data connects to other data, and how to effectively communicate our findings. These are the 3 questions that will frame our dive today. So I always begin by setting goals. And no matter the topic or the question at hand, my ultimate overarching goal when researching is to build a narrative to tell a story. The story must do 3 things: answer the initial question, be directed to a specific audience, and must be based in facts. So let's try to remember those 3. Let's begin with accessing data. As a small business owner, a collegiate student, or even a professional Googler, we will all find our way to data in different ways, and that's okay. There are federal, local, and private data sources that can be used, but your first step is to know what you're looking for. Some of my favorite guiding questions are, what are your clients' needs, or who is the actual final audience? Then you want to understand the client's or audience's level of sophistication. I was always taught in journalism that the general public is estimated to have somewhere around a 6th grade level of comprehension. So you have to know and understand who your audience is. Next is the use of results. How will the results of my information be used to get a business loan, to make an investment decision, or to market my small business? Next, I want to request a time frame and or a budget. So to plan appropriately to meet deadlines. And if you think it's something that you can't do personally, then do you have the budget to outsource research? Next, I also want to know a snapshot, if I'm gathering a snapshot in time, or am I working with the historical trend? You want to know this in the very beginning, because if you need a point in time snapshot, you need to know when. And if you are going to use years of historical data, then you need to be able to prove a trend to do it appropriately. Next, I want to use the appropriate geography. So data is typically tied to a geography. It's defined in the beginning what your geography is and if it's appropriate for your needs. If you are a small retail business, you do not need all of Louisiana as your geography. You should be focused more on the 1 to 3 mile radius that surrounds your immediate business. And then last guiding question that I really like is compared to time. Nation, state, peers, or competitors. Are you using comparisons to make your data point? Who will you compare to and why? Say I am the owner of a small tech firm that is looking to scale up and obtain government contracts. It would make sense for me to compare and evaluate my competitors, like companies like CGI, who already access government contracts in my area. So after you know what you're looking for, now it's time to see where do you find it. Here are a few common reputable sites. So I'll just touch on a few of these. While I do that, drop in the chat box or the question and answer box some of your favorite data resource sites, whether it's listed here, maybe on my next slide. I just want to see what your favorites are, what you've used in the past, or what you've heard about and that you want to know more about. So let's look at Data USA. This is when you put a question into Google, this will probably be one of the first sites that come up when it talks about demographics or economic trends. They put it in a very quick and easy way to read community profiles. And then you have more robust sites like Bureau of Labor Statistics. This provides detailed workforce data, average employment, unemployment rates, wages, etc., all based on different geographies. And then you can get the information down to a monthly, quarterly, or annual basis. And then you have the MacDaddy. The Bureau of Census. So most people are familiar with the decennial census, but don't typically know or realize there are multiple programs that come from the Census Bureau, like the 1 to 5 year American Community Survey or the annual Community Business Pattern Series. So these surveys help fill in the gaps and provide estimates for the years in between each decennial census. And then you have one of my favorites, C2ER. So this is Community for Economic Research, which you see on the slide multiple times because it hosts a variety of data. But they are most known for reporting their cost of living for geographic areas. I actually have the pleasure, along with some of my coworkers, to report costs for the Lafayette area. So if you ever see me speed walking through a grocery store with a clipboard in my hand, it's probably because it's cost of living time. We are typically given like 2 days and a list of items that we must get 5 prices from different sellers. This could be price of a very specific tire from 5 different tire shops. They could ask for the price of a banana from 5 different grocery stores, or the price of an annual checkup from 5 different doctor's offices. So this is how each community collects data, and we report it back to C2ER for them to aggregate and tabulate averages and report out each quarter. Then you have some other resources, more of the paid resources. And most of these can get pretty pricey. Some of them can range between $20,000 and $30,000 a pop. One of my favorites that we use here at LEDA is Esri. So this is a secondary third-party site that creates automated reporting. We use something called their business analyst tool. Now, this provides detailed demographic reports. These can be set for traditional geographies. You can create it within a radius of your business or site, or we can even draw custom polygon areas to pull demographic information. Then you have another one, like another one on the list that we use pretty frequently is Info USA. So this company is very interesting. We use them to develop our business lists. And this company has an entire division of employees whose sole job is to rip through local phone books. They go through phone books, catalog listed businesses, and then they have to turn around and call each of these businesses to gather more information to produce robust business lists. It's pretty impressive, but like with all data, you have to take it with a grain of salt. So, pro tip, even with all these resources and hundreds more out there, there are many limitations to data, and be aware that sometimes that the data just does not exist. However, if time allows, you don't have to give up there. You can get creative and collaborate with partners and figure out how to collect and analyze new data. New data is great. It can be as simple as posting and boosting a targeted poll on Facebook, or as detailed as surveying 10,000 people and using analytical software like SPSS or Tableau or Power BI to analyze the findings. It's really up to the researcher based on allotted time, funding, and expertise with the topic at hand. Okay, so now that we have a few tips on accessing data, let's dive into how we understand the data we use. Here, I'll point out 5 things. 1, the data must be accurate and accessible. So accuracy and accessibility is important to support our credibility. Without credibility, you lose the interest of your clients, investors, and even partners. 2, is the methodology clearly stated? When researching data, it should be easy for you to find the methodology of how the data was put together. So the methodology should define the procedures used to identify, select, process, and analyze information about a topic. This will help the reader evaluate validity and reliability of the information provided. 3, knowing if the data is current or historical. So always check the year of data. It seems simple, but a lot of people don't always check the year of the data. Sometimes it may seem like data from 2010 may be not very relevant anymore. However, in most cases, like the data from the census, this will be the most current and reliable information available on a specific topic. Now, when using historical data, it must make sense. Why are you going back 5, 7, 10 years to evaluate a trend? What is the purpose in that? So in my day-to-day job, we compare historical data related to economic events. For example, comparing the 2014 oil and gas economic downturn to the 1980s oil and gas economic downturn. That makes sense. And that way we can draw many parallels across time with our data. 4, another way of understanding data is to determine if it's comparable. So are we utilizing matching geographies? I would not compare like the city of Lafayette versus a parish or a metropolitan area. These are different types of geographies. So even when comparing the same geographies, I would not compare the city of Lafayette to the city of New Orleans, simply based off population, unless it was on a per capita basis. So using per capita allows us to compare more apples to apples when stacked against larger metro cities. That also helps with consistency. And then 5th, know your audience. Assume they have very limited knowledge on the topic, and you must know what you want to tell them and how you want to show them. So, pro tip, remember to source everything. This is not only for your audience's benefit, but also for you as the researchers to remember where you retrieve the data and when you retrieve the data. Data reliability. This is another important point in understanding data. So I like to think of them as primary, secondary, and tertiary data. So primary, this is government collected, consistent, impartial, with new open methodology information. These would typically come from sources like the Census Bureau or the Bureau of Economic Analysis or the Bureau of Labor Statistics, some of my faves. So these are typically free services also. Then you have secondary. These are your third-party companies who use reliable estimates, computations, listings, and that include polls, interviews, and surveys. These sources are often using primary data that has been repackaged to make information easier to digest for the consumer and easier to access for the researcher. However, with these services, like I mentioned earlier, they can be pretty costly. Now, this would include sources like Esri Business Analyst, as I mentioned, or Duns and Bradstreet reports that provide business listings. And then one of my favorite, the Nielsen Company. So have you ever received a random envelope in your mailbox with a few dollars cash and a survey? I mean, that's these guys. And what they are doing is filling in the gaps of information that don't otherwise exist. And then lastly, you have tertiary data. And These are institutional and private entities that put out reports or studies. So you must be careful with these reports because more than likely when they're developed for a reason that serves their entity or their client's interests. And these can sometimes be one-sided and not as reliable as primary and secondary sources. Another pro tip, one thing you will most likely want to leave out of all data findings is your opinion. Opinions can destroy credibility. Your most important task in reporting data is to remain credible. Your clients, investors, partners want to know that you and your research is solid. Now, let's cast out the life belt and reel you in. I'm sticking with the water puns here, guys. How do we effectively communicate our findings? Reporting the data can be simple, but I like to use some guiding questions to lay out how I will explain my work. So first, you want to know, why did we do this study? Typically, it's to answer a question or to prove a point. Next, you want to know, what did we find? After all of our research, what did each source reveal to us? What numbers or stats did we find that answers our initial questions? Then you have to ask yourself, why does it matter? Now you have to elaborate on this idea, on the idea of why. So why this data or the initial question was pivotal to your business or to your client's needs. What are we going to do about it? Here's where you can get really creative in your reporting. So we already know the issue and the data that supports the issue. Now you can explain what your business will do to combat the issue. You now have the compass on where to steer the boat, but the final question is, so what now? In other words, how are you going to do it? This is where you make an actionable plan to get from point A to point B and describe it to your audience. Lastly, you must decide how you want to display your data. For some, it will be a full report or a business plan completely printed and bound, or for some, a visual presentation or audio platform. For most popular these days is an infographic, and this uses pictures and words and shapes and characters to paint your story. And that's it. You've taken the high-level boat ride with me to gaining access to data, understanding the data, and reporting the data. Thanks for hanging in there with me, and I have a lot of time for some questions. Corey, we have any questions?
Sorry, adjust my screen a little bit. So we definitely want to thank you today for that presentation. I know I learned a lot of good information from you. Brittany, if you can sort of tell people, I know that I talk to a lot of business owners that need to utilize data, help inform their marketing efforts or to see where their clients are located and things like that. For entrepreneurs that may be starting out on a low budget, can you just sort of highlight some of those resources that you've listed that they're able to access data for free?
Yeah, sure. So let me throw out there first that part of LEDA's mission is to assist with businesses, whether you're just starting off or whether you're a large conglomerate. We're here to assist in data finding needs, and we do all of this free of cost. So what you would typically do is just email somebody in our department or info@lafayette.org and request information. And then we'll have a call with you, a talk with you to talk about what your data needs are. Because a lot of the times, some people just don't know what data they need to fill out, a business plan or a loan request for a bank. And that's what we're here to help do. But some of my favorite resources, like I mentioned earlier, is the census. It can be a monster to navigate. It has so many ins and outs, but they're trying every day to make it more user-friendly. So they, instead of American Fact Finder now, they have the data.gov. So it's a very robust search engine, kind of very similar to Google. So if you go in there and you search and say, oh, I need to know the population in this area, or I need to know the population by this age in this area, it's doing a lot better job than it has in the recent past to be able to pull up that data very quickly and precisely for people who are just not as familiar with the platform. So the census, most of the federal sites, like I said, are free. Bureau of Economic Analysis, Bureau of Labor Statistics, also free. So that's very good for people who are just starting off and want to dive into some data to be able to elaborate on their business needs.
Okay. So I have a question here that came through. The question is, how can small businesses use site selection data to their advantage?
So a lot of small businesses, following big business is a big thing, okay, for small businesses. Being around companies that do something similar to what you do, but also being able to piggyback off of their success is really good. So in using site selection, that's really good. So if you know that a new Walmart is going into an area and say you are a small beauty salon, or you can compete for those areas, for those spots next to that Walmart, because you know foot traffic is going to be there. Also using site selection data, like where can I move next? So say I go to the OM as a small business, I incubate, and then I graduate. And then you need to know what you can afford. Where can you go after that? What area of the city is going to be best for your small business? And we also assist with things like that. So we'll find properties for you within your square footage, help you develop what your square footage should be for your type of business, for your size of business. And a lot of small businesses have found that very useful.
Gotcha. Well, you've kind of just touched on what my next question to you was going to be. Just if you working at LEDA, some of the small businesses that you've helped, can you give us sort of examples of how you were be able to collect and provide data to them, what they needed it for, and how it impacted or helped their business?
Yeah. So some of the most requested information, of course, is demographics. So you want to know who's in your area of where you're selling to. So a demographic report can tell you the population, the age of your population, how much money that population is making. It could even break down how much that population is spending on retail services such as groceries or clothing or household items, so that you can make sure that your area is surrounded with people who you think will buy from you. So we have that. People ask for that all the time. And then people ask for traffic counts. A lot of small businesses like to have traffic counts because they need the foot traffic or the traffic in front of them to be able to pull in people without having to spend a lot of money on marketing. So being out there in the open is very, very important for a lot of small businesses. And then something that I do also is calculate economic impact analyses. And this can be used for small businesses or large businesses. And this pretty much says that by you putting a business in a certain area, how much you're going to contribute to the economy around you. And so these reports typically help businesses gain loans or get public support to be able to say that they're creating an impact in the area. So that's some of the most requested types of information small businesses like.
And that's, I think it's an incredible tool to use. You had a lot of great points. I know when I've talked to some people in trying to use data, I've seen some mistakes that you've highlighted where they're not exactly comparing, apples and apples to apples, and the geographic location isn't defined, or they're comparing one particular community or neighborhood to like another parish or state. So I think it's always important that they can, that they use the data correctly to inform decisions, to build those business plans, to make key decisions on where to locate their business, to inform their marketing efforts, to make sure that they reach the right clients. So I am going to does anyone else have any questions for Brittany? I'm checking the chat box to see if anything else is coming through. We still have a little time left. Okay, so this is your last chance to get a few questions in. I'll give it a little bit of time. Okay, it looks like I have questions coming in. Brittany, what advice do you have for people who are looking to enter the field of data analysis?
Oh, that's a good one. Just a little bit about my journey, I guess. I went to school for journalism. I went undergrad for journalism, and I went to graduate school for communications. And how I ended up at LEDA was honestly through just a random email that said LEDA needs an intern. So I came over here. I honestly didn't even know what economic development was, to be honest. And it kind of happened by chance that I ended up in the market intelligence department. And so even though my degree wasn't specifically economics or business, where there's a lot of research heavy education or courses, that journalism still prepared me a lot for this, job, especially with some of the research classes that I had to take there. My advice would be to definitely be willing to start off at the bottom of the totem pole. Like I said, I started here as an intern, and that was like 6 years ago, and slowly worked my way up. And just being aware and always reading. So every morning I read something called the Morning Brew, just to know about how not only the local economy is going, but know about how the nation economy is going. And it helps you in different ways. You just never know what nugget of information you're going to grab from an article, from a newspaper, from the news in the morning time, that'll help you in your day-to-day to stay on top of like knowing about information. And then you have to be very willing to teach yourself. So just continuously professional development, continuously reading, understanding, just being aware of your surroundings, that all helps to build like a very good data researcher.
Okay, kind of continuing on that topic, can you share some insight as to like what career opportunities are out there for someone who decides to go into this field of data analysis? Obviously, I know you were for the local economic development authority. In general, what opportunities are out there? Where could someone who wants to pursue this career expect to work options? And as far as salaries, like what do people who take this career path normally make?
Yeah. So it's kind of a hard question, but a lot of places have data analysts. So anywhere you have your economic development, that's not the only people who have data researchers, but then you have like hospitals. They have data analysts all the time. And then you have the branches of different like medical fields. So one of our interns actually just left to become a data analyst for a behavioral center like in Crowley. So it's very open to where you could land with this type of background. So it's honestly a very good and flexible like background to have. And then I'd say probably starting between the $30,000 and $60,000 a year is probably where you'll typically find somebody in this field. It's not high paying, but it's a very valuable experience and very critical to most organizations. So you have to it has to be something that you love to do and something that you find interesting to keep doing.
Okay, we thank you. Thank you for your presentation today. Any last words, reporting thoughts you would like to leave with the participants before we end the session?
Not other than the contact me page. I'm always here and willing to help however I can, whether it's mentorship guiding, or if you need information for your business or your companies, or to help your staff in any kind of way. Always here to help.
Awesome. Yes, feel free to reach out to Brittany. I know a lot of folks here locally who have, and whose businesses has benefited tremendously. So Brittany, once again, thank you for that presentation. I know that I've learned a great deal of information, and that hopefully more people reach out to you and utilize the resources that we have here to help their business. So to all of you out there, we hope that you enjoyed this session, and we look forward to seeing you at the next one.